Hello, welcome to our Share Wireless News. I'm Roberta Prescott and I'm at Futurecom 2014. This year, the hot topic at Futurecom is network functions virtualization, and to better understand this concept and to further discuss it, I have here with me Werner Schaefer. He is the Vice President of Network Function Virtualization Business at HP. I will start asking you about worldwide how carriers and if carriers are adopting this concept.
The question is what we would call adopting or not adopting. So there's certainly a huge interest in NFV from the carriers, and if we look back at how it evolved, it is actually something that was put together and that was very much so driven by the carriers in the first place. The original NFV white paper that was published in 2012 came from 13 carriers that got together out of a proof of concept that Intel and HP and British Telecom did on the broadband remote access server. And that then got shared, and some of the work that Verizon did on STN, they came all together, they wrote the white paper. So NFV is actually something that is very much, and I would say so till today, driven by the carriers themselves. It now has grown. There's, way past 100 members of that ETSI NFV industry group. But I think the major players in there are still coming from the network side of the carriers. So the idea is certainly well adopted. It's certainly driven very much so by the carriers. When we talk about adoption as actually taking the technology into the network, that's a different story, right? So we're involved in almost 24 proof of concepts with the large carriers around the world, in all continents, where we now show that it can work. They get their hands on it. They see what the results are for them, and they can get more comfortable with it. And part of the proof of concept work from our side is also building our labs. That's an announcement we just recently had yesterday at SDN World about the partners that we have brought together that are building out the labs. We have labs running already in Europe and in the US. We are adding by the end of the month Korea and Israel to that. And with these technology partners, we staff them and we make sure that we build and maintain an NFV stack that is very much aligned with the ETSI recommendations, and then is supported in the field again to give the carriers, so to say, a safe pair of hands that leads them through the adoption of NFV technology.
I have two questions, and I'm going to ask first. From 2012 to the date, what has changed? I mean, in terms of technology development, or in terms of carriers embracing this concept?
I think I would define change as the evolution from them, right? So how we walked past from 2012, and it was probably more of a high-level idea at that point, and there were 9 use cases defined by the carriers. Those were obviously the ones that they had in mind first in terms of getting them out of their current situation of stale, shrinking, or at least not growing revenues. At the same time, they have a huge explosion in the data traffic and the investment. So born out of that, obviously, were the first use cases. And I think we've seen now, I think we're now at 25 official proof of concepts that have been submitted to ETSI for recommendation how certain areas can be solved. And that's probably the evolution that we've seen over the last 2 years, where all kinds of combinations, usually an ISV that has a solution, or one of the equipment providers, a carrier, and maybe one of the IT companies like we are, that came together and solved a specific use case, and they submitted that to ETSI. So that's the evolution that we've seen over the side. And I think with that comes the I would call it almost the hype that we see. We think Gartner, the hype curve, we're certainly on that. And that's part of why Mobile World Congress in February was all about NFV, and this is probably why Futurecom also is all about NFV, that the carriers really embrace it, and seeing that as what will help them more important than cost savings, actually find new revenue streams, be more agile, and reach their customers faster with new offerings.
You mentioned a software-defined network, SDN. How are these two combined, or can these two be combined? And if carriers can combine SDN and NFV, is it better for them, or do you think they are going to adopt one first and then the other, or they should be adopted together? How that's work?
Well, I think we always say, they're two separate things, but they're highly complementary, right? I mean, if you look at SDN, it's certainly a networking, a protocol thing, and then NFV is something that talks about the network functions and the carrier network. But obviously, you can both concepts together that will get to, either management, easier management, more agility in the network. So we definitely recommend doing both. And from a solution perspective, we are obviously combining our assets that we have from SDN. Again, announcement yesterday that we had with our new DCN solution that works in the MPLS environment and helps actually virtualize across data centers. Together with NFV. For us, it's definitely something that we have together as an offering. Now, it doesn't mean that a carrier can only start NFV if they use SDN or vice versa, right? So from a pure telco perspective, we already see some virtualization in certain network functions that are not necessarily relying on SDN technology. So it's highly complementary, but you can definitely do one without the other.
So 25 carriers around the world are analyzing NFV. Anyone from Latin America? And how do you see carriers move from Latin America into NFV direction?
I mean, there's definitely more than the 25 that are looking at it. We concentrate.
Can you disclose the name?
Well, I mean, they're all in the ETSI NFV group, and obviously Verizon and BT had public references to that, and the 13 that published is NTT was in there, Verizon was there, obviously Vodafone was in there, AT&T. So you certainly see the large carriers looking at that very closely. In Latin America, I mean, we know that obviously the European players that are investing heavily in Latin America, Telefonica, Telecom Italia, they're obviously working in the country organizations in Latin America and looking at the similar benefits that they will find in their home networks, and will definitely bring it down here. I think in Latin America we definitely see América Móvil playing a role there. They have a lot of country organizations as well, and the interest, as we see here at Futurecom, is big, and we had many carriers that we've spoken to yesterday and today, and we have more tomorrow, that all want to see where are we heading with, what's our strategy in terms of NFV, and we have a long history in telco, so it's we have good relationships with all of these carriers. It is as applicable here as it is elsewhere. I think the question is who wants to move fast and who wants to be first, or can be first, and what are the areas that lend themselves to an early NFV adoption, and that combined with where are the pain points, what is it that the different carriers around Latin America feel as their most urgent need? Is it the revenue generation, or is it potentially some cost situation that they're in? We know from some carriers that the data traffic, the growing data traffic, just sucks up so much of their available capital that they don't really have much room, so they probably start on the cost saving first if they can. And there's others that are just looking for new opportunities to find revenue.
So can we expect more for Futurecom next year, I would say?
Absolutely. I think NFV will be with us for years to come, for sure. And there's still a lot of things that need to be solved. I mean, we're not in a stage yet where we will see major rollouts in carrier networks. There's still a lot to learn, and there's also a lot of the operations challenges that need to be resolved. It will require a lot of different skill sets than what the operators were used to have or are having today, and we will definitely have to deliver operations models, and we also have to make sure that the orchestration and management functions will be very solid to deliver the availability requirements that we have in the network, which is 5 nines or 6 nines, depending on what part of the network you're looking at, and those are all things that we're still working on. So probably towards the later half of next year, I think we will then start seeing really some more large-scale, like national rollouts. Before that, we'll probably see more things in machine-to-machine or in more contained environments.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Check out all our Shell Wireless coverage at the Futurecom at ourshellwireless.com.